All right. Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for joining this Farminar today. I'm Steve Carlson. I'm a staff member with Practical Farmers of Iowa, and I'm the host for today. Um, yeah, we appreciate you joining this special Friday lunchtime edition of our Winter Farminar series. As you know, our topic today, we've got one of Iowa's experts on this topic, Maury Wills. He's not only got about 20 some years experience with growing apples organically at his farm in Adel, the Wills family orchard, but Maury's also the bureau chief and organic program manager at Adels. So Maury's got a ton of practical information to share about managing pests and diseases today, so I'll try and turn it over to him real quickly. So if you're not familiar with our Winter Farminar series, we actually start back in November, and we do these pretty much every Tuesday night up until next week. We do record all of these Farminars, so if you've missed one or if you're going to miss one of these future ones, you can check our archives and watch the recording. But like I said, these are typically Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. and this coming Tuesday night, we've got Iroquois Valley Farms leading a presentation on how and why to work with investors to expand your operation or to start an operation. So that's this Tuesday, March 14th at 7 p.m. A week from today, March 17th, at noon again, is our final Farminar topic, and that's the challenges and opportunities in hazelnut production. So join us for either of those or both of those next week. Those will be great topics. So a little bit about Practical Farmers of Iowa. We've been around for just over 30 years, and we were founded by a group of farmers who were interested in improving their profitability and their efficiency and stewardship. And we're still very much focused on those issues today. And our mission statement is strengthening farms and communities through farmer-led investigation and information sharing. Our values at PFI are welcoming everyone, creativity, collaboration, and community, viable farms now and for future generations, and stewardship and ecology. So if you identify with our values and our mission statement at PFI, we encourage you to join us. There are several member benefits that you can read about on our website, but most people would agree that the greatest benefit to Practical Farmers of Iowa is our community. And so think about becoming a member and tapping into our network of other farmers doing like similar stuff to what you might be doing. So find more information about that on the website or talk to me after the Farminar. Also on our website is an event calendar, and I wanted to highlight an event coming up next week. If anybody is in the eastern Iowa area around Solon or Iowa City, we've got fruit and vegetable farmer meetup at Salt Fork Kitchen in Solon, Iowa. You can get those details at that event calendar at practicalfarmers.org. And a couple of housekeeping tidbits here. Like I said in the chat box, if you want to stay in touch with PFI's Farminars, please provide us with your email address. And this time of year, we send out weekly emails, and then we'll send you an email if we do any pop-up Farminars in the spring or summer or fall months before we start up next winter with our Winter Farminar series. And it's fun to see where everybody's tuning in from. So share in that chat box there where you're at. It's fun to see that. Like I said, I'm in the Ames Practical Farmers of Iowa office. And if you didn't notice, on the very lower left corner of your screen is a poll that says how many people are attending via your connection. This helps us track how many people are watching. So if there are a few of you watching from your one computer, please check that box so we kind of get a good head count of who's all here today. So while Maury is talking, feel free to use this chat box with any clarifying questions that you've got. But we do plan to save 30 minutes at the end of his presentation for all other questions. So if you ask a question and we don't address it during the presentation, we'll make sure to get back to it before we wrap up everything by 1:30 Central Time here. So then finally, one other thing is up on the top of your screen, kind of in the middle, there's a box there that says please provide some feedback, and there are 3 links. The top link there says click here to give PFI feedback. That's a survey that we'd really like you to to take before you log off today. Give us a little feedback about today's presentation, but also that's a great opportunity for you to tell us what topics you want to hear about in the future. So let us know what topics or what presenters would be great for a Farminar. So take that before you log off today. And then there's also two other links underneath there. Will's Orchard Material List. That is something that Maury's going to reference in his presentation, and the Degree Day Calculator. Both of those are links to websites that Maury's going to reference, so we'll get to those a little bit later. So without further ado, I'm going to switch these presentations here, and then when Maury's comes up, he'll take it away, and we'll talk about managing pests and diseases on an organic apple orchard. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
All right, thank you, Steve. And hello to everyone out there. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day today to participate and tune into this webinar. So let's go ahead and dive in because I have a lot to cover today, and there's just really a lot to talk about here. So first I want to say that I'll be talking with you basically wearing two different hats here. First, I'm going to start with the Organic Certification Program. So I've been with the Iowa Department of Agriculture for 20 years. And when I came in, there really wasn't an organic program per se. And work with an organic standards board, and we set up a state organic certification program. This was before the federal program. And we certified farms for a couple years, and then we got our organic program accredited by the USDA, and we've been certifying according to the USDA ever since. And so I'm very familiar with the regulation, very familiar with the restrictions and constraints that sometimes are in front of us as organic growers, but also very familiar with the opportunities. So I just want to let you know that anything that I talk about today, any practice that I talk about, that I suggest or recommend, it would be an allowed product or practice under the organic program. I'm not going to lead you astray here. So you can rest assured that what I talk about is all consistent with the organic program. Secondly, as an organic apple grower, so we started our orchard back in 1987, or 1992 rather, and it was 1997 before we really had any crop to sell. And we started this orchard organically for a couple of reasons. We were raising children at the time, and we didn't want them or ourselves to be exposed to some of the pesticides that were out there. We wanted to be able to go through the orchard, or our kids to go through the orchard, pick an apple and eat it, not worry about it. And the other reason was I grew up in the city. I didn't grow up on a farm or an apple orchard, and I was not familiar with conventional practices. And I thought if I was going to learn how to raise apples organic or at all, I was going to do it organically. So those are a couple of the reasons why we decided to do this, and it's been a journey ever since. So just a little background on our farm and about me. So back in 1992, our land, we had 32 acres there, and we didn't have any resources on it at all. I mean, there was no water brought to the farm, no power. We didn't have any building, any shelter, no place to live. You might say that we were crazy for going down this road. And we thought we were, and we thought we might want to bail on this a couple different times, but we've kind of hung in there. And we knew that we had some family and friends to support us. We didn't have much. I had some carpentry skills, and I had studied and studied and studied as much as I could about apples, about apple growing, about organic techniques. And so all this really prior to the internet as we know it today. So I spent a lot of time in libraries. I was looking up a lot of information pre-World War II to try to find out how they grew apples years and years and years before the advent of all of the chemistries that we have today. So just fast forward a little bit. These are just some pictures of our orchard. Some of the production that we have going on here, semi-dwarf and dwarf, semi-dwarf basically M7s, some M111s, and then primarily now bud 9s on trellis systems. And we decided at some point that we would get into pumpkins, and this has been a good draw for us. and corn maze, some of the agritourism components. And I'm just going to breeze through here a bit. Animals on the farm. And this is just an aerial view of our farm. So basically, this is approximately 60 acre farm now. When we first came out, it was just from here, that would be our north boundary, and this part of the farm here. This is what we purchased, the first 32 acres. And then about 8 years ago, then we purchased the rest of this land here, another 30. We had the opportunity to do that. And so we are located in Dallas County, southern Dallas County. We're about 2 miles north of I-80. We're on a mile and a half of gravel. And as you can see from this shot, this is Panther Creek here. And then what you can't see is Raccoon River that wraps around here. We're probably a half a mile north of the Raccoon River. So we're up on a ridge, an incredible ecosystem here in terms of wildlife, habitat, just natural surroundings, but it does make it even more challenging than as an apple grower because all my pests live just right out in here everywhere, including deer. And I would mention that we just finished putting up deer fence. It's taken us a number of years, and that deer fence, we have a gate here across our lane, and the deer fence goes all the way up here, right here along the timber, comes down and around, goes all the way down, and it encloses all of our production area and our home now. So we are pleased to be able to keep the deer out. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about insects and diseases and what they do to our apples and how they reduce our yield. But if you're growing apples and you're in a heavily populated area of deer, you're losing a lot of apples, a lot of branches. They're doing the pruning for you that you don't want done the way they're doing it, and that's a problem. So if you're going to be really thinking about the nuances of insect management and disease management, you might want to think about keeping those big critters out as well. So just a little bit about my approach here. So, you know, we've seen and I've seen as an organic program manager different approaches that people have to organic. Some come at it very much unaware of, you know, the organic principles at play necessarily. And so they would go at it perhaps organic by neglect. And actually, that's kind of how I started the apple orchard years ago. We just kind of thought nature would do its thing, and boy, nature did do its thing, and we lost a lot of apples and to insects and disease and so on. And so it's really no way to run a commercial organic apple orchard. Then there's the organic substitute approach, which basically is, you know, I'm just going to use organic products rather than conventional products. And again, not really paying attention to the bigger picture. And number three here, organic health management. And I like Michael Phillips' quote from the Holistic Orchard. He has a couple of books. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with his work. Stewarding what needs to be right while intelligently setting limits on what might go wrong. And so the reason why I put this slide up here is because I am going to get into very specific things to address some of the issues, some of the insect and disease issues. And so it might appear that we're taking a very substitution approach, but I want you to know that when we use these organic products, we're using these in the context of a more holistic system. And so I just want to recognize that from the beginning, and I'm going to touch on that from time to time. It's not going to be heavy on philosophy or principles. Again, Michael Phillips has done a great job with that, and I would refer you to his books. So I'm going to kind of stick to more or less the how-to as we go on, more restricted to insect management and disease management. All right, so we need to know who our friends are. We need to know who or what in the environment is going to be or are going to be working for us. At the same time, we need to have an idea of, and really more than an idea, we need to specifically know what is working against us out there, what insects, what diseases are out there that are working against us. From time to time, I'll be stopped by someone and they'll ask me, I have this stuff I bought at like a Rome, for example. It says for apple trees, and I just went ahead and sprayed that, and I think hopefully that'll take care of my bugs. Well, obviously they're not aware of what insects are out there. They're not aware of what their life cycle is, and we clearly want to get way away from that kind of approach, which is really just covering your eyes and spraying something out there and hoping that it's going to do some good. And I'm sure all of you who are tuning in know what I mean, and that you're well beyond that. But I think it's just really important that we drill into uh, what our beneficials are and what our antagonists are out there. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this either. Again, this is just foundational. I just wanted to put it here again to acknowledge that our environment, the insects and various microorganisms actually in our environment are very helpful to us in our battle with diseases and insects. So just a slide here on lady beetles and a little bit on green lacewings, and we have plenty of both. We have a lot of each at our orchard. And so there are many more and worth protecting. If you can create areas where they can thrive within your orchard or on the perimeters, boundaries, that would be great. Excuse me. And here's an obvious point to make. Just keeping your orchard clean. And there are some organic growers that do it this way. They bring in sheep or hogs, chickens. We have tried a number of things. We have also brought chickens out into the orchard and very good at picking up bugs, including plum cuculio. But they also can create some challenges for you because if you have any pets or if you have coyotes and so on and fox, then you're protecting the chickens as well as the trees, and it becomes quite a bit of a menagerie out there. So we no longer bring any creatures out into the orchard blocks. So with keeping in mind that we should keep things clean, I just wanted to show this slide here. We have some hay mulch on the ground for some of our newer trees. By clean, I don't mean sterile. And so by clean, I mean keeping the drops cleaned up. And we would mow periodically. And there are a number of theories out there as far as mowing is concerned, but we do tend to mow and try to keep it clean. We are moving or have moved actually away from using the hay mulch, but just because hay mulch also harbors voles and mice and tarnished plant bugs. So we now use wood chip mulch for our weed suppression. So again, just kind of paying attention to that foundation, the holistic system here. As you take time, or it does take time, to move your orchard from where it's at to where you want it to be, you're going to need some tools. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, or what are some of those tools then to deal with the insects and the diseases in the meantime. So if you're a conventional grower, or even if you're starting brand new, you may feel a little bit like this little guy in the corner. And you see this big toolbox up here that the conventional growers have to use, and you're planning to go organic and you're looking for the tools and you can't find all the tools, and do they really work, and you feel a bit overwhelmed. And I will tell you that this will come back to you from time to time if you go down this road and transition to organic. There are going to be times where you're just going to feel a bit overwhelmed. Quite honestly, the organic products in general are not as effective in killing insects and managing diseases as the conventional counterparts. There are some that are, and there are some that are very, very good, and we're going to talk about those. But for the most part, the conventional grower has a lot more chemistries available to them, which of course, from an organic point of view, also brings with them more negative consequences to the environment, and then can create additional problems. So do I think it's worth it? I absolutely think it's worth it, but it is difficult. So let there be no illusions about it here. So it's an intensive approach to managing apple trees. So As far as what products you can use, so the organic regulation is set up this way. Synthetic products are prohibited unless they're listed in the regulation as allowed. And natural products are allowed unless they're listed in the regulation as prohibited. So if you want to take some peppers and squish those up and spray the juice from peppers and garlic and what have you in your orchard, you can do that. Those are natural products, natural substances that are not prohibited in the regulation. If you want to use a synthetic product, and there are some, you would have to find those on the list in the regulation. So the handout or the attachment, my material list, all of those products that are listed there, if they have in the column to the far right, when you get a chance to look at that, it'll say who they're approved by. So OCIA would be Organic Crop Improvement Association, WSDA would be Washington State, Omri is another one. If it's blank, then I have not gotten approval from that, for that particular product yet. And there's very few of those on there. And just, I would like to mention too, kind of a disclaimer, my orchard, my farm is certified organic by Organic Crop Improvement Association. It would be an obvious conflict of interest if I would have my staff go out to my farm and then I would sign my own certificate. So just want you to know that up front. Okay, so there are a variety of things in the organic toolbox, some botanicals, virus type products that we rely on, bacterial type products that we also rely on, and we're going to talk about those more specifically as we go along here. And there are also are some disease management products, biofungicides, and as I sit here, I see more and more labels come across my desk, different alternative type, organically approved type products that producers are using. And I just talked with one of the companies yesterday again. And they have their sights on continuing development of products that can be used on organic farms. So it's exciting to see that companies are doing this. Again, over 20 years ago, when I started in this arena, there were very, very, very few products out there available to organic apple growers. So it has really come along over these 20 plus years, as well as research that's taken place over these years. So in addition to these kinds of tools, just keeping in mind, we talked about beneficials, but also cultural practices, whether it be mowing or pruning and those kinds of things, getting air and sunlight into the canopy of the tree, and we'll touch on that again as we go. Okay, so I want to spend quite a little bit of time here talking about knowing where you are at all times. So again, those of you who are apple growers right now, you know where you are, so to speak. You know if you're in a dormant stage, or if you're in silver tip, if you're in green tip. These are important things to know. What phases your trees are in at what time for a number of reasons, whether it be just to worry a little bit more about an upcoming freeze, for example, but not only that, just in terms of when certain insects are going to be in the orchard and what you can do when. The same with diseases. So we look at the phenology. So looking at phenology, that is one way to know where we are. Another way is to use monitoring traps. So we can monitor for codling moth, for example, or specific leaf rollers. You can even monitor for plum cuculio. It's not quite as reliable as monitoring for codling moth, but you can monitor for these insects as well. And then a third tool would be growing degree days. And so when you and I'm going to explain that here in a little bit, but when you take all three of these together, monitoring traps, phenology, and growing degree days, you start to get a really good idea where you are in the orchard and what's going on out there, as well as scouting. So, you're always out in the orchard, you're always scouting to see what's going on. So where are we at right now? So there is a good a website, and that's part of the attachment here that you can get to at some point. And this tells you what degree day you're at. And so I'd like to just explain degree days just a bit. So there are a number of ways to calculate degree days. And so insects are highly tied to the weather, as is the development of our apple trees, the buds. And so models have been developed where you will take the low for the day, the low temperature for the day, and the high for the day, add the two together, and you'll come up with an average. And so the next slide will explain that, I think, a little bit more. But just right here, if we look at degree days, and this is using the Des Moines Airport, and when you go to this website, you'll want to put in the nearest weather station to your farm. And you can see I put in 1956 because that's the year I was born. And we have accumulated almost 50 degree days back in 1956 by this time. So this is all yesterday. The average is the black line. So about average. If you look at 2012, if you recall, that's pretty much the year we didn't have much of a winter. That's the blue line, and that's a little over 100, 110 maybe. The purple line represents last year, 2016, almost about the same as 2012, not quite. And look at this year, the red line, 2017. We are way ahead of just about any year that I have any recollection tracking. Now, we have cool weather forecast for the next several days, and I know there's a warm up again in the forecast. It was in 2012, later in March, when it really started getting warm. So this blue line is going to catch up with this red line at some point, and we're going to be traveling along the 2012 path, which, obviously that's not a good sign because we run the risk of getting into freezes. So again, here's this idea of degree days. You take the low and the high, add them together, divide by 2. And in degree day models, they use a base and sometimes a ceiling. The base would mean the plant or the insect doesn't really develop until it gets that warm, and it doesn't develop after it's so warm at the ceiling level, let's say 88 degrees. And then you divide by 2, and then you subtract out the base, and that's how you start accumulating degree days. So it's really important. I would just encourage you to play with that and go out and look at different degree day models. Now, this is one way of doing it. There are some more sophisticated ways of doing it, and I really don't have time to go through that today. So suffice it to be just like this. And this is the link to this website right here. And so right here, you would put in wherever the weather station you live near and put in the dates. And that's a little tricky there. Make sure when you go to the calendar and you put in the date, you actually click on the year, but then go back to the calendar and click on the day or it won't hold. You can put any base in here you want. 45 degrees is used for tree development. 50 is often used for insect development. And then you just click make a plot, and then you will get something that looks like that. Oop, not like that, but like that. And you can also add different years here, and that's how I did that. Okay, so let's dive into insects. And you're probably familiar with some of these, maybe not all of them. And we're kind of going to go along how, time period of when they appear in the orchard here. So we have scale and aphids, tarnished plant bug, green fruit worm, and there's other fruit worms that are out there and present during this time. And then plum curculio, codling moth, and apple fly maggot. Okay, scale. So again, I just would suggest read up as much as you can about the behavior of any of these insects. Find out, what they look like, what do they do, how do they harm the trees or the apples. Just really get familiar with them. And so with scale, what we want to do, early in the season, scale has that hard secreted shell that's around them and kind of hard to get at any nymphs. And of course, they're really not crawling yet. But you want to spray a dormant oil, which is fine, 1 to 2%. And I tend to use pure spray green. And you're going to spray dormant to half-inch green. So again, going back to that chart, the Phenology chart, you can look and see what half-inch green looks like. Then as far as their reproductive cycle is concerned, the nymphs or crawlers, they're active at 2,903 degree days. They begin to be active. And so when it says DD51 here, it's using 51 as a base. So again, the low for the day, the high for the day, add them together, divide, subtract out 51. And there's some calculators out there. You can make your own spreadsheet. When you get up to this number, and that we're talking, later in the season, then you know that they're at a vulnerable time. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for activity and vulnerability. And so at this time is when you want to go ahead and make your spray application. And as we get into this with all of the different insects and all of the diseases, some of these products are going to be the same in each case. And I would encourage you to make a chart, and we can talk about that more at the end if we have time, so that you can see, yeah, when I'm taking care of this insect, I'm also dealing with this one. It's going to manage that one as well. So there's overlap, and that may affect your timing. Okay, aphids. Everybody's familiar with what aphids do, I would guess. And again, it's not, usually in our orchard, we'll see some hot spots here and there, but aphids are really not a big problem in our orchard. Um, you want to get the ladybugs to work for you and uh, really try to do things that are not going to be too harsh. And that's where conventional chemistries sometimes create situations where aphids can flourish. And so again, spraying that dormant oil, just like with scale, dormant to half-inch green, and then just watch for hot spots as you go. And I put this other picture here on the right bottom corner, keeping it in balance. As you will see as we go, I'll talk about a product called Surround. Surround, some of you have worked with. It's a powder. It's a kale and clay, and it's kind of challenging to work with a bit. But I noticed when I started using that, especially very heavily some time ago, that it did affect our aphid situation here. And I think because the lady beetles weren't finding it quite as friendly out there, having to climb over those clay particles and get to the aphids. So you have to watch that, again, keeping that in balance. Tarnished plant bug. This one I have not really treated for in my orchard, but I think that I need to. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a protocol for tarnished plant bug. But and there are a number of these different types out there, and they like to get into strawberry plants as well. And they like mulch, hay mulch. And I don't have time to really read, about them so much here. So we're going to look at some of the damage that they cause. So a number of damage areas on apples can kind of look similar. And so I find it helpful to really dig up a lot of photos that are out there on the internet showing damage from particular insects to try to really see what the identifying marks are of those particular insects. And so just from a quality management point of view, it's really good uh, to look at those apples and really try to understand and see what's really doing what out there. Because it's not enough to just see a bad apple and go, that's a bad apple. You've got to understand what's really causing it. So there are some natural predators out there, and that's good. You can get some white sticky cards and place those out in your trees about at silver tip, a couple feet off of the ground. And if some of your orchards are small, I'd probably trap a little bit more. My orchard, we've got about 5 acres of apple trees, and but essentially, the recommendation is 1 to 3 cards on the edge of a block. And so then you're going to take those cards and you're going to go out there daily perhaps, and you're going to count the number of catches and then divide that by the cards that you have. That'll give you an average. And then when you reach basically what we might consider a commercially unacceptable level, 2.4 catches, by tight cluster or 4.1 by late pink, then you need to take some action. And mycotrol O is what the recommendation here would be. And for this particular one, I didn't put up the rate, so I would just suggest you look at the label for that. But university research has shown it has an ability to kill the tarnished plant bug. So I think you might find that beneficial. And again, the product that you would spray is really not harmful to the beneficials out there. So, okay, moving on. Green fruitworm. I think if you've had an apple orchard, you're familiar with this. You go out early in the year and you can see the damage that they'll do. They'll chew into the side of a little apple, and but they are very easy to manage. And so early in the year, I do use a fair amount of dipel because dipel, Bacillus thuringiensis, at 8 ounces per acre, and I spray about 50 gallons per acre. So that would be 8 ounce in my tank. And early on in the year when trees are growing fast, when the canopy is increasing quickly, and insects are developing fast, I might even go with a pound per acre. And then cut it down to 8 ounces later. So your call, just do some scouting, see what's going on out there. And so you want to get after this right at pedifall. You really need to start because as soon as those little fruitlets start to develop, you will see this and other insects as well. So um, BT works really well. The larva will stop feeding within a few hours and then eventually shrivel up and die. And of course, dipel is an approved product, and there's a number of BT or Bacillus thuringiensis products out there. Dipel is not the only brand, but that's one of them. Okay, we're gonna spend a fair amount of time on this creature here, plum curculio. When I first started to look at raising apples organically, plum curculio was my nemesis from the very beginning. I thought, this is the one. This is the Achilles heel, as they all say. This is what's going to kill me. And it is a tough critter. When you look at it, it's constructed like a tank. It has the shields on its back and near its head, and it can really crawl and move. And it's very hard to deal with, as are most beetles. And this is what they look like. They're not very big, and sometimes they'll look like a piece of bark, and but they can be very, very harmful. So my approach to plum curculio, as we get into this, I'll say at the beginning, is it's going to be this year very, very, very intensive. And you're going to look at this protocol and you're going to wonder, oh my gosh, we are just taking out every product to deal with this insect. And then hopefully I can back it off a little bit if we find that it's successful. But you can't take this insect casually at all if you want to really manage it, because it can take down almost all of your fruit, and it can do it in several days. The female is capable of laying up to 400 eggs or so. So generally 1 generation in Iowa. The adults will emerge again from the earlier laid eggs later in the summer. But for the most part, your job is to deal with them in the spring. And we're really going after the adult because the eggs that are laid, so right here, she'll make a little slit on that apple, little flap. And from the way I understand it, that flap is made, one, to protect the egg because she's going to shoot that, she's going to turn it around and over deposit that egg under that flap, and also to relieve a little bit of pressure from a growing apple so that that egg, as it turns into a larva, will survive. That's what she's trying to do. These are some of the apples that matured, and we have a scar here. The fact that this apple survived and grew really testifies to the fact that that larva was destroyed by the pressure of the growing apple. And so that apple becomes a second at least. So we used to do with plum curculio, we'd put a bed sheet on the ground, and this is an invention actually that was used years ago. It's a pretty cool invention, like an upside down umbrella, and under here is like a tank filled with some water and some oil. And they'd go around and tap the branches of the trees, and the plum curculio would slide down here and go into that tank. And so we did it with the bed sheet when we just had 100 trees, and we'd bring the chickens out into the orchard and that kind of thing. And it was kind of a crazy deal. We'd do it every morning during plum curculio season, and definitely a hassle and a challenge with little kids who they're excited to do it the first time and hate doing it every time after that. So eventually we migrated out of that. Okay, so here's what I consider very intensive treatment. And again, my treatment up to this point has really been to use surround only, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But plum curculio, they're attracted to the orchard by scent. They smell different parts of the developing tree, whether it be the leaves, the fruit bud, the fruitlets, the flowers, but they're very, very driven by scent. So there is some thought out there if we could mask the scent of the tree, that perhaps we can divert the plum curculio. And we have a lot of wild plum in our area, and perhaps that scent would be stronger. If we could go ahead and spray cedar guard early on at 200 degrees, 50 base. Now remember when I showed you that chart earlier, we were looking at a, I believe, 45-degree base. So don't want to get confused and say, oh my gosh, we're almost at 200-degree days, because base 50 we're not. And so we're using a little different base here. And so cedar guard, the recommendation is 1 quart an acre. And so now again, this is how I'm going forward today. So one decision to, or a decision to get into this organically is also pretty much a decision to experiment a bit. And so, I'm inviting you to experiment as well. You may decide you're going to try certain things here, but not other things. And there's a huge cost factor with all of this. And so I'm very aware of that. And so you really have to put the pencil to the paper. But if you have an orchard where either you historically have had a lot of plum curculio damage or you expect it, then it's going to be, more feasible that you're going to spend some money in trying to eliminate this insect. So one, we're going to take advantage of that trait that the insect has, that plum curculio has, and that's its olfactory sense. We want to divert the insect from coming into the orchard. So we're going to try to use cedar guard here. Maybe garlic guard, any of the garlic extract oils, maybe some of those would work. So cedar guard is an allowed product. And then Entrust, and Entrust is a pretty strong product. It's spinosad or spinosad, and I use it for codling moth. But there's also a bit of information out there that maybe Entrust might help as well. And I should just pause for a second here too. As I've come across these things, I would just tell you that a lot of this is talking with other organic apple growers, reading books, Michael Phillips being one of those, university publications, and then just publications about insect pests that have nothing to do with organic, but just the behavior about these insects. So just wanted to let you know that there's a lot of information out there that you can study. So Entrust, 1 ounce is about half the rate that's recommended when you use that product for codling moth. And then Venerate. Venerate by Marone, I've not used this product yet, and has some promise. Sounds like best used with surround, and we're just going to maybe check that out this year. The problem about using Venerate is that the recommendation is 3 quarts to the acre. Really, the recommendation is every 3 days, and I'm not going to be able to do it every 3 days, but a couple times a week. You could do it once a week. Again, depends on your pressure, depends on how much money you want to throw at it. So some real good research needs to be done. Unfortunately, sometimes with, I think all of us who wants to set aside a block to see if we're going to have damage on that block. And so you'd have to do it in small areas. And these insects move around, and so it's kind of difficult to just say this, 10 trees I'm not going to spray or manage plum cuculio on, and then base any conclusions on that. I think it would take a bigger area in a more remote area. But so again, if you want to throw everything at this one, these are the products that are actually labeled for use. Venerate is labeled for use. And again, I talked with Marone yesterday, the manufacturer, to find out, because the label wasn't clear if they are going after adults or after the eggs. And they agreed that they are going after the adults. And so that's what we want to do, because the eggs at this stage are really, really hard to get at. Okay, and so you can just see here you have the beginning part of this where you're going to hit them at 200-degree days with the cedar guard, and then come back with entrust, venerate, and cedar guard to get that petal fall coverage. And then the remainder through plum cuculio season, which is going to really take you through until about 340-degree days. And that's when the adults stop coming into the orchard and stop really moving around. So the period of time here, 200-degree days, base 50 to 340-degree days, base 50. That's when we're looking at treating for the adult plum cuculio. If you want to treat in the summer with a spray here or there, this is when the adults would be expected to emerge, 1,250-degree days. So I realize this is a lot on plum cuculio, but plum cuculio deserves a lot of attention, because there's a lot of things that a lot of people have tried that don't work real well. And so entrust is got to be a main part of this as well. And entrust, you really need to spray it separately, because you don't want to mix it with a lot of oils. You can put your insecticides in there, the venerate and even the cedar guard, but you'll see in some of the other applications that we have that call for oil, if you're going to do that at the same time you're managing plum cuculio, you want to make sure your entrust is, or your, not entrust, I'm sorry, your surround is applied separately. Okay. All right, so we have moved from plum cuculio to codling moth here. And codling moth damage is pretty easy to see in the apple. And I'm being mindful of time here. I'm going to need to move a little faster on these insects. The codling moth tends to lay the egg that then becomes larva, goes up through the center core of the apple, and generally pops out the side and goes back down in the ground and pupates. And we can have, a good couple strong generations here in Iowa. So what we do with codling moth is we go ahead and trap, and we set these traps out early enough in the season before the adult males are flying around. And we'll go back to that. And when we catch approximately 6 to 8 codling moth, and these are adult males, that's when we begin counting degree days, and we'll get into that here in a few more slides. So when we catch the codling moth, and when we catch again about 6 to 8, we'll call that our biofix. Okay, so there are some natural things that help us in our fight against codling moth, heavy rains, woodpeckers, and so on. Some have tried bat houses. I've put bluebird houses all around my orchard. They like insects, they like moths. And there are some things to help deter, again, cedar guard, mating disruption. If your orchard is fairly flat or pretty square shaped, mine is on a ridge, narrow here and there, and it varies up and down. Mating disruption isn't real effective at my place, but those are the tags where you put out in the orchard, and they're impregnated with female codling moth pheromone, and the male cannot find the female. It basically floods the area with pheromone, and that's the idea there. So it is a very good practice, and it is organically approved. The passive pheromone strips are approved, not the active emitters. They're attracted to light. You can start a pile of wood on fire at night during their flight times. There's some things you can do, putting cardboard around trees and so on, where they lay their eggs and take those off and burn them. All very intensive. These are not things that we do anymore. And then if you just have a few trees in your backyard and want to set up some sticky traps, you can do it this way. But again, it's not a real commercial way of handling it, and you're not going to be totally pleased. But if you're just growing some apples for yourself or applesauce and you don't mind cutting your apples up, then that's fine. Okay, so first control from biofix, the time when you caught those adult males, you set that date, and then you're going to start counting your degree days, base 50 again. When you get to 250 degree days beyond that biofix date, then you'll apply 2 ounces of Entrust. And some of this recommendation came to me out of Michigan State a number of years ago. They may have moved on to a different protocol, but this is the protocol that I use. Sidex then, which is a virus specific to codling moth, that's for my second spray in this first generation, 2 ounces, 7 to 10 days later than the first spray application, and that's about 50% egg hatch. Whereas I'm going to get my pointer here if I can. Okay, where this one here, we're just getting beginning egg hatch here. And so then you're going to spray again at about 50%, and then again at 90% to 100% egg hatch, and you're going to combine the two, Entrust and Sidex, and that's again another 7 to 10 days later. And that's been a pretty effective way of managing codling moth for us. Our damage and codling moth damage really went down precipitously when these two products hit the market. And so they're very, very expensive. Entrust is over $350, I believe, per pound, and Sidex comes to you in liquid in a quart, and I believe that's 300 and some as well. It's very expensive. Applefly maggot, this is not a real, I don't find it a real difficult insect to control. This is the insect that will railroad the egg that becomes the worm. The maggot will railroad through your apple. That's how you can tell the damage there. And the outside, you can see the gnarliness of the apple. And so apple fly, researchers at Purdue determined that they were attracted by a red round sphere. So this, I guess, would qualify a Dixie cup, and there's a hexanate scent here that's used to help attract them. I don't use that. That's another organic apple orchard there. I tend to use this, which is a plastic wiffle ball that kids play baseball with, wrapped with a sandwich baggie with this tangle trap goop on there, and we set them out usually the 1st of June. But again, you can look at the degree days here. Their peak flight, about 1600 degree days. So you want to get those out there. I would say before they merge, before 900 degree days, base 50, get these sticky traps out there about eye height. And I just, look through the orchard a row, and you can see how they're spaced here. I go every several trees and put one up. Now, if you want a little more insurance, Entrust is a powerful product. It will take care of apple fly, but I don't use it for that. If I'm spraying for second generation of codling moth, it might handle some of the apple fly, but I wouldn't spray specifically for that. It's like pounding a tack with a sledgehammer. So what you could use is Grandivo here, and at 2 pounds to the acre with new film as a sticker. And again, this is just kind of that time frame. Or you can use the sticky traps to monitor and see if you're doing a good job trapping the apple fly and not bother with the Grandivo.
Hey, Maury.
Oh,
So
yes, Steve.
just a quick heads up that, yeah, we're just now getting into diseases, and I don't want to go past 1:30. So let's just say 20 minutes on this to 1:15, and then that'll leave us 15 minutes for questions, if that's all right. All right.
Okay, yep, I'll try to speed it up. Okay, we're going to talk about diseases here now, and sooty blotch and fly speck, cedar apple rust, quince rust, apple scab, and powdery mildew. So again, just being mindful as far as the biology is concerned. Now, Michael Phillips really does discuss a lot about competitive colonization, and competitive colonization really looks at applying products, basically microorganisms of a sort that would thrive in your tree, on the leaves, in the tree canopy. There are a number of biofungicides, number of other kinds of products out there that you can use to kind of cover the leaf, like Serenade, for example, is one. But many of these products actually are soil-borne organisms that don't really live real well on the leaf. And so there are some things that you can do. Again, I would refer you back to Michael's book on competitive colonization. But I find that I have to use some other tools in addition to that to control some of these diseases. And we're going to talk about induced systemic response as we go. Okay, sooty blotch and fly speck. And basically, you've probably seen this this brackishness on the outside of an apple, and generally it'll wash off, but sometimes not always. Sometimes you can really get a good case of this, and it's really hard to wash off of the skin. The other thing is, if you have hundreds of apples or hundreds of bushels going through, do you really want to scrub or hand scrub these apples? You don't want to do this. So we conducted a research project, or Iowa State did with us, a number of years ago using copper and sulfur. And basically, you look at wetting hours. They put up a wetting hour monitor in the orchard. And you can do this by observation, but it's not as accurate, of course. But at 175 wetting hours is when we began spraying copper, half rate of what the label indicates, and then sulfur followed approximately a week later. And we did that for, I don't know, probably into early September to mid-September. And you have to look at some of these copper products because some of them aren't rated to be used very far into the season. So this is one way to deal with sooty blotch and fly speck. And I would say this experiment was successful. We really had some clean apples when we used that method. And again, some of this, on some of the skins of some of these apples can be very, very, very hard to wash off, to clean up. So there's other options here, and I've put those out here. So option 2 would be using stylet oil, JMS stylet oil, or pure spray oil, both of which are allowed. And go ahead and spray basically the oil in a rate of 2%. And again, we use 50 gallons in our water spray tank, beginning at 175 wetting hours. And the whole idea with using stylet oil is that the stylet oil or pure spray oil, they're considered a protectant. And so you're trying to protect the apple from these organisms taking residence on the skin. Another option is Quava and double nickel. So it's back to copper, which is pretty effective, I would say. If you don't like to use sulfur, and I don't, this is another good option using Quava or double nickel, 55. And again, you'd have to look these products up to understand a little bit more about them. There is some research indicating that they started their sprays at 240 degrees, or wetting hours rather. Pennsylvania, I saw a research report rather than 175 wetting hours, which is what we used here when we did the Iowa State project. So we may have come along in the research, which would be good if we could wait just a little bit longer. But ideally, from a cultural practice point of view, if you maximize the light and airflow through your orchard, through pruning and summer pruning, you're going to be better off and may not have to apply anything at all. And some varieties are just plainly more susceptible. Okay, so cedar apple rust, this is kind of my challenge on the disease side, just like plum cuculio is on the insect side. And I have had leaves. These are actually leaves from my, this is Crimson Crisp, I believe, which would be a good apple from an organic point of view as far as scab is concerned. But you can see the tremendous damage from cedar apple rust. And so cedar apple rust, basically this disease comes to us from these galls that hang in a cedar tree. They sporulate, those spores go out into the air for miles and miles. And again, they have a season and it's early in the spring. And this is where we have to deal with protecting. And so we did another research project at the orchard where we used calcium and silica, BioLink calcium and sea shield, one using potassium bicarb, millstop, and then we use a sulfur and copper protocol. Copper definitely does nothing related to cedar apple rust, and that's not only my opinion, but in talking with plant pathologists at Penn State, copper just does not take care of cedar apple rust. So I'm not going to try any of these three. I believe that all three of these, for the most part, did not work out well. So obviously, if we're going to protect the leaf, timing is going to be of the utmost importance. And so what we're looking at here now is using either JMS stylet oil. I probably use pure spray green oil, and that's just a matter of convenience. Either would work, but I just have plenty of the pure spray green on hand. At 1 to 2% every 7 days through the risk period here. And then regalia, which is this product that will help the plant build compounds in the leaf to help resist the cedar apple rust disease. So Virginia Tech has done some research on this, and I believe it's Virginia Tech. It's one of the Virginia schools. Did some research using regalia and JMS stylet oil, and they saw excellent results in terms of managing cedar apple rust. And so we're really going to hit it real hard and stay consistent with it. So if you receive more than 3/4 of an inch of rain, you need to get it back out there and apply the oil. You can take a little bottle of water with you, pour it on the leaf from time to time and see if it beads up. If it does, you still have protection. But the idea is to keep that leaf covered with oil. Okay. There's some other things here. The effective microbes, you can work that into your system as far as a holistic approach is concerned. But if you have heavy pressure as we do, you're still going to need to utilize some product like the oil to protect the leaf. Quince rust, really a cousin to the cedar apple rust, basically is easy to manage. You'll see what it does to the apple here. And you want to just get that out there during bloom time. You're going to spray Serenade. So the Serenade goes down into that flower cup and grows. This is that competitive colonization that I talked about earlier, and it works very well. And you will eliminate just almost all of this quince rust problem. Liberty tends to be pretty susceptible to quince rust. And then there's apple scab. And I'll tell you at the outset here, I don't really have varieties. I've got a few, but none really susceptible to apple scab. So the first choice here is don't plant scab susceptible trees. But if you have those, I'm just going to go through this just very briefly. There's a lot of information out there related to scab. So some will use the Mills apple scab infection table to determine when that infection period is. And there are other tables out there to really drill down, more specifically so that you're not wasting product or spraying too much sulfur out there. So you can really get into when that infection period is threatening your apples. And so again, for me, I really am not, don't have an orchard that's susceptible to this. But one thing, if you do, and again, if you also have other kinds of problems like fire blight, it's just kind of a good cleanup here before too long to spray a copper product. And again, Quave is a good one for scab and fire blight at first green, but before half-inch green. So that's important to get out there and to kind of clean up anything from previous year, as well as whether you want to spray microbes on the ground in the orchard to help digest and break down any of the materials that might be harboring scab from previous year. And then you can use a spreader sticker like New Film, or even oil to help that Quava product kind of get into the cracks and crevices a little bit better on the trees. And so there are some that would say that the oil does about as good of a job as sulfur in terms of protecting the orchard from scab. And I don't know that from experience. You would have to experiment with this. Excuse me. But again, I'm moving further and further away from sulfur. So my product of choice would be to experiment with the oil. Powdery mildew, again, oil does a very good job in dealing with powdery mildew. And so if you look at powdery mildew in terms of its infections, when it's most growing, I could say out there, would be between 66 degrees and 72 degrees and the relative humidity of 70%. So, you know, are you going to be checking that close? Probably not, I'm going to say. And so you just want to probably include, again, your oil that you're using for other, whether it be insect or cedar apple rust, would also be assisting you in the fight against powdery mildew. So you might be just incidentally managing the powdery mildew because some of these periods overlap. And again, that goes back to charting when you're going to do what and looking at these various diseases to see if you're going to get some overlap. And so the thing with powdery mildew, though, you're going to be going further into the summer than you would be with cedar apple rust, for example, into August. And powder or millstop, that's another good product. That's effective. And Serenade, Sonata, some of these, there's just a lot more tools when it comes to powdery mildew. And I realize I'm kind of rushing here to the finish line. And so just as we kind of wrap this up a little bit, the idea here is to keep the orchard clean, maximize the airflow and sunlight into the orchard canopy. You want to reduce pest habitat as much as possible. We do a lot of wood chipping of our pruning, and we put those back on the ground to keep the grasses and weeds down, that sort of thing. So orchard layout, all of that is very important. And it is very important in terms of what varieties of trees that you have decided to plant. There's a number of varieties that I, unfortunately, to a certain extent, have planted that are susceptible to cedar apple rust. That's why I'm really trying to get aggressive with cedar apple rust. And so if you have that option, sometimes you really want that certain variety, and it's going to be susceptible to cedar apple rust or scab. So you're going to have to be all in terms of managing that. And here are some of the varieties at our orchard in order of harvest. So Pristine would be our first variety and that we would have. And it's a great early yellow apple, crisp and tart, sweet, maybe sweet tart, depends on when you pick it. And it kind of shows here whether or not it's resistant or susceptible to a certain either cedar apple rust or scab, and then the harvest period there. So you'll be able to look at this chart. Just a word about tank mixing. Surround can be very difficult to use, and so what we've learned is that it's best to just take like a garbage can, 30-gallon, 40-gallon garbage can, and fill it with water, and then pour the bag of Surround into that water and don't touch it. Let it submerge until you don't see any powder at top. Then take a shovel and stir it. It'll stir up very, very easily, and then get a bucket. That's what I do anyway, and I just, just take that bucket, dip it in there, and then pour that back into my spray tank while the agitation is going on. So if you try to mix that powder, while there's still some dry on top and some in the water, it'll just get all chunky. And if you're using neem, which I have not talked about in this presentation thus far, if some of you use neem, best way to use that is get it warm, get it out in the sun, or have some warm water that you pour it in and mix it in first before you ever start to use that. So in summary, dealing with insects and diseases, you want to, again, maximize light and air penetration through the orchard, whether that be through pruning or how you're laying things out, the size of trees, whether they be bud 9s or M7s, M111s. Create areas where different insects, beneficial insects, can thrive and move into your orchards. And then, if you can take this information here today and digest it and create a table for yourself, and that's what I usually do, is I create a table for myself and I list the things across the top. So I have an insect chart, for example, and I have the insects listed across the top. And then the left-hand side going down in this table would be basically either phenology, like silvertip, half-inch green, bloom, and so on, or degree days. And then I would start plotting out what I'm doing when for different insects. And then you start to see the overlap. And so really recommend that you create that kind of chart. And I think it'll be helpful to you. And then lastly, just don't be too afraid of this, because it may be daunting at first and maybe a little frightening to get into it, but in the end, it really is a rewarding way to grow apples. So it can be tough, but if some of you get involved, then we can kind of support each other and help learn from each other, because there's not a lot of people in Iowa, quite honestly, doing this. There's a handful. All right, and in the end, I just want to say thank you. We'll take some questions here. My contact information is here. The Department of Ag, if you need to reach me here, is here, and this says "and land stewardship" behind the photo. And then my home information, email, website is all right here. And if you need anything to discuss anything, feel free to call me here at the Department of Ag if you'd like.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
Steve, open it up
fantastic.
for
Thank you very
questions.
much, Maury. That was packed with information. And so, yeah, if anybody's got questions, we've got time. We've got about 15 minutes here, so pop them in there. Looks like Jill already started it off here. She's struggling with apple tree borer in southern Iowa. I don't think that was one that you covered, Maury. Any thoughts on that?
No, I have not had such a problem as far as apple tree borer is concerned. The best I could do there for you is to refer you to Michael Phillips' books. I know he talks about borers there. I'm sorry, I don't have experience with that.
Maury, while we're waiting for another question, I just wanted to ask real quick. At the end there, you mentioned neem oil real quickly, but it
Uh-huh.
wasn't really a part of your spray program. That's something that Michael Phillips talks about a lot. Why don't you use neem oil, or what are your thoughts on that real quick?
Right. So I do like neem oil actually. It's pretty challenging to work with, and I have used it, and I think that it is beneficial, and I'm actually not going to count it out. I will use that probably more as a fertility product, although there's evidence to suggest that it could be used against plum curculio in terms of other insects too, just in terms of their molting and their development. And so I would say that there should be a place for that, and I'm not against using that at all, but you just kind of have to learn how to use it and when to use it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Looks like a couple more questions in there if you want to
Yeah.
just field those.
Okay, so a question from Kathy. Do scented flowering plants, example, lilacs, assist with confusing bugs? Well, I think it's possible. You'd have a timing issue whether the strong scent of the other plant is out there in strong enough force at the time when you need it to be out there. And so you could try some of that kind of companion planting, so to speak. If those scents overlap, I think you'd get some benefit. You may not get as much as you would if you're spraying something like a cedar guard or a garlic extract, something like that. So, experiment. Again, we are still definitely in the experimental phase here for organic apple production, especially in Iowa. Um, Helen asks, are there extra challenges for people with only a dozen or so trees to get a small quantity? of the products. Yes, unfortunately, as far as the inputs are concerned, it can be difficult getting some of these products. I think there are some spinosad products out there in smaller quantities. You know, we tend to think of a pound of something as being pretty small, but when a pound of something's almost $400, that's pretty big. So I hear what you're saying, and you know, maybe it's something that if there's others in your area that are going to try to go down this road and they have a few apple trees as well, you might go in together on some of these things. But chances are that product would have to last you a year or two, you know, to make it worthwhile. But yeah, it's difficult. You'll have to search for those.
Yeah, and Maury, related to that, I am wondering if you could mention your source for some of these products. Is there any brick and mortar, you know, store that you can go to in Iowa or in central Iowa, or do you order all of these from a certain place or all over the place, or how do you source your stuff?
Right. And so the materials list that you'll be able to get to that I've posted out there, that one does indicate the source, but a CPS out of Galesville, Wisconsin. It used to be called La Crescent Orchard Supply when it was located in La Crescent. And then it became something else, I believe, and now it's a CPS, and it's out of Galesville. And that's apple country up there. They understand apples and they carry a lot of organic inputs up there. So that's my first go-to. Agri Energy Resources out of Princeton, Illinois is another one. Advancing Eco Ag on the fertility side, they're out of, I believe, Ohio, and you'll see all of those on my list. And CPS is really easy to work with. They'll send you the product, and usually they'll take a credit card or they'll bill you later. Advancing Eco Ag, Advancing Eco Ag, I believe you have to have something set up with them ahead of time. But I don't order a lot of products from them, actually. Let's see, any recommendations for managing voles? So with voles, we put on the tree wraps in the fall, and we try to disturb the area before we settle in for the winter. So mowing and mowing close and getting close to the wood chips as best we can. It's really nice. Like this past year, it really didn't get snowy, and so we went down there and mowed again in November. And any late mowing you can do to disturb them because they're really getting set up for the year, and having a plastic guard or even a wire mesh guard on your trees, that will really help with voles. We've had a lot of damage in the past, so we've taken some pretty strong measures to make sure that doesn't happen again. Try to keep any other piles that might be around eliminated or stirred up before you go into the winter. A question from Helen, what kind of things such as bluebird houses and other environmental elements can I put in my backyard to do what you said toward the end about attracting insects? So there's some pretty good resources out there related to gardens for beneficials. And so when you think about lady beetles, you think about lacewings, those in particular are very helpful related to various kinds of larvae and parasitizing larvae in your orchard. So if you would look up the kinds of things that attract lacewings and lady beetles, that would be good. Lady beetles, of course, eat aphids, but um, so that's one resource. I know that entomologist up in Wisconsin, and I can't think of his name right now, he had a pretty good list that he put out there. If I can find that, I'll get that to Steve as far as various kinds of plants that you can plant that will bring in beneficial insects, particular to an apple orchard. Another question, do you purchase beneficials? If you do you need to okay with organic certifier? So anything you do, if you're certified, even though it's something like beneficials, you should always run that by your certifier. But typically, it's not a problem. We have trichogramma wasps in the past. We have ordered those and let those hatch out. They come on a card, eggs, as you probably know, and they hatch out. But boy, it is really hard to measure that. You'd almost have to do some research to see if that helps you. There's some research to suggest that they'll hatch out at your orchard but then fly somewhere else. They kind of have this, uh, I don't know, inner drive to kind of fly a certain way. And so I don't know that you can keep them there, so to speak. But I think beneficials is an important aspect to this whole thing.
Maury, I'm curious. You mentioned selecting disease-resistant varieties as being really important. Does the rootstock play into that at all? I know rootstock, has d- can help mitigate some of the soil types that you've got, but does rootstock selection make any difference with pest and disease pressure?
That's a good question. At least for me, what I have found, it's really more the cultivar than it is the rootstock. At least it seems to be, because I have different cultivars in different places in the orchard, and they all seem to be susceptible to the same kind of pressure, regardless. And then I have different cultivar, or the same cultivar and different rootstock, and same kind of thing. I would tell you though, since we're on this topic, Priscilla tends to be a pretty good apple related to um, plum curculio. Don't seem to like it as much, and it's an awesome tasting apple. It's kind of like a Gala taste, I think. It's really a unique flavor. And Priscilla got mixed up years ago when they were doing plant breeding, and there were actually two different kinds out there. And so I have some Priscilla that I had gotten from oh, I'm gonna blank. For his first name is Jim. He's got a nursery, and he's in I think Michigan. You'd probably know Steve and others what nursery I'm talking about. It's a small family nursery. I got like a half a dozen of those Priscilla, and they are the right ones, and they are good. And so I have sent grafting wood, budwood to Adams County Nursery, and I'm going to be getting about 150 of those trees planted. So Priscilla is really good. No scab, no cedar apple rust, and plum curculio don't seem to like it. So that's a good variety. But plum curculio really loves Liberty. Um, George has a question here. When you spray surround, how can you gauge that you have adequate coverage? So surround is one of those things that you just really have to keep applying and applying and applying. And I would just say, just look at your tree. And if you see a lot of leaves that seem to not have good coverage of surround, you probably don't have enough. And I would say typically from year to year, I do not have enough a good coverage. And of course, when you want it to cover the tree is when we tend to have all those spring rains. That's when you really want it to cover the tree. So surround can be expensive. I don't know what it is right now. I bought quite a bit of it here a couple of years ago, so I still have some. And I think I was paying $1.70 something a pound. It's probably close to two, maybe a pound now, and they come in 25-pound bags. So I would say, George, just kind of stay at it. Just keep layering it on. You want your trees to look really white. Okay, Kathy, do you put honeybees in your orchard? Yes, I kept bees for years and years and years, and now the orchard and there's so many things to do. I actually have a beekeeper come in and set up a bee yard, and he puts 30 hives in, and he'll have them in early here. I need to actually get in touch with him, and then he'll take them out around Labor Day. We'll leave them in there for pumpkin pollination as well, and we don't see a real problem with that. And when I spray, almost always I'm spraying in the dark. I'm almost always spraying at nighttime, just because we're up on a ridge top and it takes that long for the breezes to go down, and so the bees aren't flying at that time. It's a good question. Was that Labor Day or Memorial Day? Helen asked. It was Labor Day when we take the bees out. Yeah, September-ish.
Still got a couple of
Looks like
minutes for
there's maybe another
questions.
question.
Yeah, looks like there's some people typing, and so we got a few more minutes. If you got a question, now's your chance.
Okay, so one question here is what type of grafting do you have a preference for, if any? Well, so I've done the whip and tongue type as well as bud grafting, and I don't know, the first one's a little easier as far as I'm concerned, but then again, others say that the bud grafting is really easy too. So I've done both. I probably have had more success with just that whip and tongue, the cleft type grafting, bench grafting. Okay. Any suggestions for beekeepers? Helen asked to put a hive in my backyard in Ames. Um, the bigger beekeepers like to put a whole yard in it. You know, a yard for them is like 30 or 32. They bring in pallets. To get one hive there, um, there is a Iowa beekeeper website, and Donna Brahms, I believe, has been very involved in that, and she is down in southwest Iowa, and she's also a queen breeder, I think, or she's going to be bringing in some queens. I can't remember exactly, but she is very, very involved. And Donna Brahms in Creston area, Griswold. Check that. It's Griswold. If you could find her or Google, they also have an apple orchard. She might be able to put you in touch. The other person is Andy Joseph here at the Iowa Department of Agriculture would know if there's some beekeepers up there that could help you out with just a hive or two. George asked, what is a good brand of tanglefoot? You know, Gempler's has a tanglefoot, tangle trap. It has to be translucent. You don't want one that has a color to it. And so any of those that are translucent would work. So we buy it by the gallon and then we just go out and apply it. So as we wrap up, I realize there is a lot of information here. And so if you do have questions, you can feel free to email me either at my orchard site or here at the Department of Agriculture. Or if it's a little more nuanced than that and you want to talk about it, feel free to give me a call. If I'm tied up, I'll just tell you that I am and we'll figure out another time to talk and we can go over some of this. And again, there's a lot of experimentation here. And so I would suggest, really keeping good notes and pushing yourself a little bit because it does take a lot of discipline to go out and spray again. You feel like, oh my gosh, I've just been out there and I sprayed and I don't want to do this. I don't feel like it. But that could make the difference between a bad crop and a good crop. So hang in there. It's seasonal, as we all know, but I think you'll enjoy the results. Helen is asking if I have a PDF file of the presentation. Steve, can you make that happen? I don't
Yep,
have.
yep, we can do that. No problem.
Okay.
I'll put my email
I'll
address in
get
the
that
chat
posted.
box if anybody wants to ask me for it.
Okay, and Gil has put that out there for you all to see that the honeyproducers.org, iowahoneyproducers.org. Thank you, Gil, for putting that out there.
Well, Maury, this was an excellent presentation, so thank you very much for taking the time to do this. This was packed full of really good details, and that's what we like in a Farminar here. So this is recorded for anybody who wants to come back and watch it again. One more plug to take our survey to give us some feedback. Tell us what topics you want to hear about in the future. There's that survey link at the very top above the chat box there. Thanks for joining us on a Friday afternoon, and Maury, we really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.